Hey guys, it's Brian again. Today we're going to be looking at replacing the unloader on this is a particular one. Is a belt drive pressure washer, but the process for this type of unloader to replace it is going to be the same whether it's belt drive or whether we're direct drive. Before we get started, talk about safety. Make sure you wear your appropriate safety gear, as well as make sure there's no pressure on the machines, no electrical issues, machines are off, all of that good stuff. Don't want to lose your fingers or your life. So as I mentioned, we're going to replace the unloader. So how do we know we need to replace the unloader? In this case, the man was telling me he was getting pressure, but he pulled the trigger and he'd lose pressure pretty quick. He was also on the thermal dump on the side over here. It's hard to see on the belt drive, but down here is a thermal dump. And what that does is when the water gets too hot, it'll open up and allow the machine to bleed off the water so that it doesn't get too hot. So pressure, when you're not pulling the trigger, pressure dies off as soon as you pull the trigger and you're getting water out of your thermal dump. That'll tell me that you've got high temperature of water and you've got something that's failing to control your pressure. You're getting the pressure, and a lot of this is easier to identify if you have a gauge on your machine. So I took this one outside, started it up, and I'm getting 4,000 psi on the gauge until I pull the trigger. When I hit the trigger, it dumps off to about 1,800 psi. And as I said, water's coming out of the thermal dump. So that tells me with the thermal dump, you got hot water. There's only two ways to get hot water, and that is if you let the machine idle without pulling the trigger, the water will get hot, and if there's a leak in the system. In this case, your unloader leaks, it dumps back down and back through and recycles the water, and that heats the water up. So if it's leaking, that means you have an issue with your unloader. So you need an unloader replaced. Not a big deal. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a working shop, so I try to do all of my videos straight through, non-stop. But there comes time when I got a customer I've got to deal with, so I'll have to stop the videos. But otherwise, I like to work straight through to give you an idea in real time what it takes to do this. So I went ahead and called the customer, told him what the situation was and what it's going to take to replace it. This is called a banjo style unloader. Don't really know why, but it's an external, not an external. This is a bolt-on. Then you also have external units, and I'll show you that on another video. But this bolt-on style banjo unloader, they're fairly inexpensive. It's very easy to replace. You can rebuild, but the time and the parts is going to be kind of ridiculous based on what it costs to buy a whole new unloader and put it on. This is very quick to do. So first thing you're going to do is take out these two bolts here. And these are a special type of bolt. If they're rusted or they appear to be stuck, you got to be careful with them, and I'll show you why. So what I like to do when I go to remove something that's been under pressure for a period of time is actually tighten it and then loosen it. Because when you tighten it, it breaks the threads loose on the inside. It breaks the threads loose versus trying to break them loose going the other way. When you break it loose in one direction, tightening, and come back the other direction, you got more room to travel to get that momentum to unscrew. So hit it, tighten it just a little bit, and then loosen it. And it'll come out. And as I said, these are a little bit different. They're hollow. The water goes in and out through here. That's how these type of bolts work. The water goes in this case, on the high pressure side, the water goes in and it comes out through here, whether it's going to your hose or dumping back off to be recycled through. So we got that one off. We're going to remove the other one. Tighten it just a little bit and then loosen it. Now this bottom one can be a problem sometimes because this one has a tendency to rust more frequently than the top one. And if you have an issue removing it, putting too much pressure on it, it will break right here and leave all of this inside. And that's another project for another day. When that occurs, I'll make another video. But at this point, they both come off pretty good, so we're happy. Now, you notice when you take this one off, there's an O-ring on the opposite side on both of these. That's going to come into play later. Now the customer already had the external filter, so I just took the fitting off of the hose and screwed on the external filter here. That way he's a little easier to clean, they actually work a little better. Now when you get these, they're going to be in your package like this. The bolts are going to be in on the wrong side. Now you can put this unloader on the opposite side if you want, but most of them are going to be on the left side as you're facing it from the front of the machine. So what you want to do, the reason they do this, there's two O-rings right here and right here. This helps keep them in place until you're ready to use it. So when you take these off, be aware that you don't snatch those out. If you do, put them back in place. Before you put it on, you want to push and pull. This will come off, it's not a big deal, but you want to make sure this is loose because you'll have to make this adjustment in or out to line up the holes. And as I've said before, when you put this stuff together, especially with two different types of metal, you thread this thing as far as you can go with your hand before you put a tool on it. So we're going to start with the top one. You're going to feed it in, tighten it up. Then we're going to go to the bottom. Now, the way I was showing you how this moves, you're going to have to, and when it's on here, it's a little harder to move. So you break it loose first, then put it on here. Make sure your O-ring is still in place on the other side. Slide the bolt in. Find that hole. Tighten it up. Tighten it up. And then I'm going to use an impact. If you're going to use an impact, just be careful. Don't go crazy with it. I'll go slow. Make sure it's bound in. Then we're going to switch to the top one. We're not going to make the bottom one completely tight until we get the top one in. Now we're tight. We'll tighten it on up. Tighten it up. So now your unloader's on. All right. Now that's the hardest part. The next part will be a little harder to show you because it creates a lot of noise, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, and then that way you'll have a better understanding. You'll be able to hear what I'm going to say. I'm going to zoom in just a bit here. Now your unloaders are not set from the factory, okay? You're going to have to set it. If you don't have a pressure gauge, which I recommend you do, but if you don't have a pressure gauge, there is a way to set this without getting the pressure too high. And what you're going to do is you're going to turn your pressure counterclockwise, which is down. And you see that collar right there. All right? You see that collar. And you see that hole. There's a lock screw that goes in that hole. What you're going to do, with no lock screw in it, you're going to run that collar all the way down. Now, some pressure washers will be able to allow you to run this machine. That's going to be full pressure right there. But we don't know if that's what this machine can handle. It says 4,000 psi. The pumps can actually produce more. Excuse me. The unloader can actually handle more, but your motor is what determines the maximum pressure you can operate. Okay? So this pump with a 9 horsepower motor, it's not going to give you 4,000 psi. With a 13 horsepower motor, it'll give you 4,000 psi. With a 19 horsepower motor, it's going to give you in excess of 5,000 psi on the same setup. All right. So this collar's all the way down. You're going to hook your water up. You're going to hook your pressure hose and your gun. Turn your water on. Start the machine. And as we already showed you, this is turned down counterclockwise. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start the machine, pull the trigger, let it spray, then let off the trigger. 2 cranks, 1, 2. Pull the trigger, let it spray, let off. Keep doing this. 2 turns, spray. 2 turns, spray. You're going to do this until that motor starts to really bog down. When it sounds like it's struggling, what you're going to do is come back 1 turn. Pull the trigger, and if everything sounds good, it doesn't sound like the motor's struggling. Yeah, okay, so forgot where I was at, but you're gonna adjust it up until the machine starts to struggle. When you hear a struggle in the engine, then you know you're getting too much pressure. So you're going to bring it back one turn, just like that. Boom. And it should even the motor out. When you pull the trigger, it should be under a load, but not struggling. Let go of the trigger, the motor should idle back up. Once you've got to that point, you're sitting at an optimal pressure, okay? And if you put a gauge on it, it may show more, like this is a 4,000 PSI, but it may show more than 4,000 when you let go of the trigger. And that's fine. If you're sitting at 42, 43, 44, not a big deal. So once you've got it set, you'll turn everything off on the machine. You're not going to need to have the machine running at this point. So once you've got the machine off, wherever you had this at, you're going to take this collar and you're going to adjust it all the way up until it bottoms out against the unloader cap. Now once it bottoms out, there's no more adjustment up because this is a locking nut. Place your finger on it so that it doesn't move, and then counterclockwise rotate this up so you can see better. Now there's the hole. You can see the hole right there. And what we're going to do is going to come with a little set screw, just like you see there. You're going to put it in that hole, and you're going to tighten it up. And once it's tight, you can turn your pressure all the way back to where you had it set, and this is going to be your maximum pressure. Now you can't exceed the pressure that the motor itself or the engine itself can't handle, gas or electric. That's pretty much it. That's all you've got to do to replace this unloader and set the unloader. Setting it's going to be crucial, because if you don't, you may end up with too little pressure or so much pressure that it stalls your engine out. So once you've got it set, bring it back up to maximum pressure, set it wherever you want to set it, and then you're good to go. You're ready to use the machine at that point. Very simple. Like I say, the biggest thing you got to watch out for is removing these and placing these back in so we don't damage the threads. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments. If you got something you'd like to see repaired or replaced or worked on, let me know in the comments. I'll see what I can do. Thank y'all for your time.